Well, everyone, good morning. And thank you so much for your interest in today's informational and educational Zoom. We are entering a very important part of the process of getting resources to El Paso. And my team and I are really wanting to make sure that everyone understands every step of the process, what we're asking of you, and what kinds of resources can be brought back to the community and how you apply. Part of my role is legislating, another part is oversight. But whenever we can bring resources to El Paso, we do everything that we can. There are a couple of avenues that have existed, obviously, for bringing resources to the community, but none of them have been really quite direct. The two processes so far, really actually there's three. One is a grants project, which my team will talk about at the end of the informational session. A grants process where you compete with other communities, other organizations for pots of money that are made available to everyone. But the two processes for us in terms of appropriations are what are called programmatic and language. And programmatic is basically asking for a certain pot of money within an agency or department to grow. And then the language is doing everything possible to direct that, appropriations towards things that are important to us. My team will go over that, but we have, for the first time in a long time, a new avenue for bringing resources to the community, and it's called community project funding. In the past, it's been known as earmarks. The bringing back of earmarks was highly debated, and it's actually still even being debated on the Senate side. And as work in Washington, D.C. to kind of create a streamlined process continues, we need to get to work gathering projects that could be eligible for what is now called community project funding. There have been some changes to that process, to how it happens, to how it's decided, to how transparent and community-based all of it needs to be, a change from earmarks to today. So it has gone through an evolution, and my team will fill you in on what those requirements are. There's kind of a short fuse on it, and we apologize for that, but we are delivering information to the community as quickly as we're getting it. And we want to be sure to answer all of your questions. You're going to meet my team in Washington, D.C. that is working on all of this. They will lay everything out, but really and then at the end, they'll answer questions for you. And if we don't have an opportunity to get to everyone's questions, you can always email us. You'll have access to the email address for questions related to this process at the end of the PowerPoint, but we are here to help you. So that's the purpose of today's Zoom, to get as many of our community advocates, leaders, organizations in the loop as possible, so that we can be as helpful to you, and so that when it's our time to fight for these dollars, fight for these appropriations and these projects, we've done everything possible to get you ready to give us that information and make sure that we get those resources to the community. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my Chief of Staff, Eduardo Lerma, who has been in DC for a long time. For those of you who have not met Eduardo, he is such a tremendous asset to the district, as are all the members of my team. Eduardo is from El Paso. He is a graduate of Hanks High School, and I stole him from the Senate side. He was working for Chuck Schumer's shop on the Senate end, but got him to come work on the House side for El Paso. So I'm going to turn it over to our hometown Chief of Staff, Eduardo Lerma, and I'm going to sign off, but please know we are here to help. Eduardo?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm assuming, Alexa, you can hear me. I had some technical problems earlier, but thank you all for joining us today. We are very excited about the attendance. This shows that there's a hunger in the community for this. on learning more about the appropriations process in Congress. And just a quick overview of the agenda today. The Congresswoman obviously gave some great remarks to start this off. I'll provide an overview of the appropriations process from the beginning to the end. I will turn it over then to my colleague, Benjamin Harrison, for the community project funding request, which is the newest part to this. And then I'll be able to talk about our grant services, and you'll get a chance to meet some of our legislative team that will be shepherding this through the congressional process, and then obviously answer any questions and Q&A for you all. But just to introduce our team, and you'll hear from Zana Saheb, who will be handling various subcommittees, which will go at the end, Denise Fernandez, and Benjamin Harrison. But I will go ahead and get started. For those that may not know, there is a process called the annual fiscal year appropriations process that funds our government starting October 1st of every year. We just went through it and had what we call an omnibus package passed in December, which enacted our funding levels for FY21. In years that we cannot agree on what an appropriation or budget looks like, we will pass what we call a continuing resolution, which just funds the government at the current funding levels of that fiscal year until we are able to come to an agreement. If we don't have a continuing resolution or what we call a CR, then the government shuts down, which has occurred several times in the last decade for various reasons. The president annually releases their version of what the budget should look like around February, unless that president is in their first year, which current President Joe Biden is in his first year. It is a bit delayed for a number of reasons, mainly because the transition between presidents was not as seamlessly as others in previous years. So we did not, their quote unquote landing teams were not able to get to the Office of Management and Budget ahead of January 20th. But we expect his skinny budget to be out next week or the week after, followed by the full federal budget. From that, that is our Congress's compass on how to produce a budget resolution. Every political party produces one, and we compare, we contrast, we debate, and the Congress will then move on to the appropriations process. The House usually begins around this time. This year's a bit different because we are doing it a bit without a presidential budget, but we are starting this process on the local level with y'all, sending out our programmatic, our language, and now our community funding project requests forms. I believe I sent it out last Thursday to y'all. The House will begin this process throughout May, early June, and try to get their bills passed through the House by August. The Senate concurrently will be doing the same thing starting in June. They will not get theirs done until September. The hopes are that we have all of this done by September 30th. More than likely, that does not occur. In years past, after October 1st, we would have to do CRs, continuing resolutions. Usually gets them passed before Christmas, as that has occurred over the last few years. With that said, knowing that a CR might occur, there's also no guarantee, and Benjamin will talk about this a little later. There's no guarantee that a project or programmatic funding will get enacted if there is a continuing resolution. Yes, fiscal year 22 budget. So we hope we are able to come together and pass an appropriations package that contains key investments in community funding. Our team, the legislative team that I just announced, will be the best advocates you have in tracking this throughout the appropriations process. They will be talking to the appropriations staff daily. We've already started these conversations every day. Our team is on briefings, learning more about this process. We will be fighting, the Congresswoman will be fighting to make sure that your bill, your language, your programmatic funding, and project funding stays in the bill throughout the Senate chopping block, and then appropriately gets put on the president's desk for signature. I will turn it over now to my colleague Zara Saheb, who will talk about the two different funding requests, the two different appropriations requests rather. Zara.
Hi, thank you, Eduardo, and thank you all for joining us here. We're so glad to be able to do this and hear your concerns and questions regarding the appropriation process. So I'll just briefly go over the two most popular different requests that you can make during this time. Of course, my colleague Ben is going to go over an exciting new different request that you can place, and that's the community funding projects. So the two requests that most of us are familiar with are programmatic requests and language requests. And programmatic request is a request to fund a specific federal program in the bill at a certain level. So that's, whether you want to increase the funding level of a certain program, decrease it, match the president's budget request, etc. That's a programmatic request. For the language request, there's not a dollar amount. It's not binding in any way, and it's included either in the bill or the report language, and it basically encourages or directs certain agencies and entities to take on a certain action. So conduct a study or oversee the impact of a certain legislative effort that was passed, etc. But that's kind of the broad overview of the different requests, and I'll pass it over to my colleague Ben, who will kind of go over an additional type of request that you can now make.
Yes, and before I hand it over to Ben, if you all start thinking through your questions, please use the Q&A function. I believe it's at the bottom of your deck bar there with Zoom, and we will start looking at them and get to them at the end of our presentation. Mr. Harrison, I'll turn it over to you, as Zada said, for the community project funding request portion.
Thank you. Let me just make sure I mute myself there. Yes, thank you, Eduardo and Zada, for going over those portions of the appropriations process. As they mentioned this year, there's a new request called the community project funding request. And basically, these requests are going to be used to direct federal funding for the upcoming fiscal year directly to local projects. The requesting entities for these projects need to be nonprofits or local or state government organization. If you're a nonprofit, you should be prepared to provide documentation proving your nonprofit status under 501c3. Because the committee will most likely ask for it if your project is submitted. In order to understand all the requirements for submitting these requests, we really encourage you to read through the resource guide we provided, and then also go ahead and read through each subcommittee form that should have been sent out last week. The guide is a great way to learn more about the accounts that are open within each subcommittee, and then the subcommittee forms will give you a good they'll provide you with all the requirements that will be needed from each subcommittee for certain projects. While the subcommittees are going to vary in what they require from projects, there is going to be some basic information that we're going to have to be publishing on our website if we submit your project for review to the committee. That includes your name and address, the name and address of the requesting entity, rather, the amount of funds requested, and then the purpose for the project, and a justification for the use of taxpayer funds on this project. So that will need to be on our website if we do end up submitting your project. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, Eduardo. One of the other big requirements is going to be community support. It's going to be a big portion of the committee, and not only the committee's process as they determine which projects do get included in the final bill, but it'll be an important part of our process, our internal office process, in determining which projects would be submitted to the committee. So evidence like this can come in various forms. So it's not limited to these, but here are just some ideas. Letters of support from local elected officials, press articles, resolutions from local governments, and then support from newspaper editorial boards, etc. We just need to have some kind of evidence on hand to show that there's a desire in the community for this project. Some additional requirements that are going to be broad-based. Neither the Congresswoman nor her immediate family can have a financial interest in the proposed project. So our office will be providing a certified letter to the committee about this, but that is just our that's going to be the policy for any of the projects. None of the funds can be used for for-profit recipients. There is going to be within the accounts that are open, there are going to be some state and local match funding requirements. The matching funding does not have to be on hand or in hand, but officials need to have a plan in place showing how they intend to meet that requirement. So that just needs to be kept in mind because the committee won't be waiving those matching requirements. The next item is that each project is going to be funded for. Can you go back a part? Each project is only going to be funded for fiscal year 2022 and shouldn't be viewed as multi-year funding. Any funding given through this process shouldn't be seen as a replacement for annual revenue. Just given the volatility of the process, Eduardo mentioned earlier, even if your project makes it into the House bill, we'll have to track it as it makes it through the Senate process and to the president's desk. So it really shouldn't be viewed as a replacement for annual revenue. The final item is that you'll need to provide a budget breakdown for how you intend to use the funding. Next slide. So the subcommittees that are accepting project funding requests are, as listed here, Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration, Commerce, Justice, Science, Defense, Energy and Water, Financial Services, Homeland Security, Interior, Labor, Health and Human Services and Education, Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, Transportation and Housing, and Urban Development. So these are the subcommittees that are accepting requests. The only two that are not are the Legislative Committee and the State and Foreign Operations Committee. A common question that we've been getting from the community is what is the funding range that subcommittees will be looking for? This is going to vary across subcommittees, but the subcommittees have kind of informed us that we should look back back through history to the previous time this process was in place to get a good idea of what funding levels we should be looking at, and the maximum really should be looked at as $1 million for a project. That's really kind of been the ceiling historically, and as this process is new this year, that will most likely be the cap again. But another suggestion that they've also provided is that your funding request should align with the needs of your project. So you should be realistic in what that funding can look like and what it's going to be used for when making that request. As we continue to be briefed on the process, feel free to email us at the email listed there, tx16.appropes@mail.house.gov, because we may get more clarification as we move through the process. And I think the next slide is grants. Eduardo, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ben. And on that last note, Ben, that is, we like Ben said, we are continuing to get information as the committees provide that for us on the funding levels. If we get any definitive answers on that, we will be sure to let you all know as soon as we get. Every subcommittee is different, and every funding level is different for the subcommittees. But I did want to talk through a bit on other ways our office can help with funding or for helping you secure funding throughout the federal government, and that's through our grant services program in our office. We have a designated grant coordinator in our office, Carlos Murillo. You can see his contact info at the last bullet, but he is an expert when it comes to grants throughout the federal government. He can help you find, the Congresswoman can help you all find relevant federal grants, funding opportunities that your organization would be eligible for applying for. The only thing he cannot do is draft grant proposals for you, but he is able to help you guide and navigate through the federal process. The office can also advocate communicating with federal agencies if you want to know where your application is, if you've been awarded a grant but haven't received the amount, and if you have questions on eligibility for specific grants, he would be the best person to reach out to. This is a completely separate process than the appropriations. After the appropriations bills are passed, all that money goes to fund grant services, grant programs throughout the federal government. And on by a case-by-case basis, our office, the Congresswoman, will offer a letter of support to an organization, an entity that is eligible for a federal grant. And this would be sent directly to the Secretary of a certain department, Secretary of Education, Secretary of HHS, or the director of a specific entity within the executive agencies. And these, of course, just want to reiterate, we can only do this for federal grants. We cannot do it for state or local grant applications. But like I said, Carlos Murillo in our office, he is our grants coordinator. You can find more information on grants on our website, escobar.house.gov. There's a grant section on there. But Carlos, he loves getting emails. Please send him an email. He will be very responsive to you as soon as if you have any questions on that. At this point, I would love for you all to get to meet our legislative team, the team that will be spearheading this and navigating all the subcommittees through the appropriations process. They will talk a bit through the different subcommittee bills that they're in charge of and some of the top line programs within those. First, you have met her already, Zada Saheb, who started in our office about a week and a half ago from another member of Congress. We got her from another member of Congress, Mark Vesey from Dallas-Fort Worth area, but she is now an honorary El Pasoan. Zada, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Eduardo. And good to meet y'all again. So I'll just briefly go over some of these subcommittees that I handle. And I just wanted to also mention, I do handle NDAA, and if you have any questions specific to that, please reach out to me separately, and I'm happy to share the information for that. But for now,
can you just talk, just a quick brief overview of what NDAA stands for and what that process is and the Congresswoman's role?
Yes, that's the National Defense Authorization Act, and that's how we authorize a lot of different defense programs and projects. And very similar to appropriations, there's also a request form that we send out. The deadline for that is a little bit sooner because of the different deadlines that the committees have set. So we do have that, and I'm happy to share that as well. But if whatever requests you send us, again, very similar to the appropriation process, we take that up with the committee and try to present it and submit it on your behalf. There's no earmarks or community projects involved because those requests are very specific, and that's in its own, it has a little bit of a different guidelines for submissions and the different information that we need to put those in place. So happy to speak on that as well if if you wanted to meet at a separate time and discuss that at any point. For the defense subcommittee, this year they are accepting programmatic, language, and community projects. They are waiving the matching requirement, so you do not have to provide a matching source for the requests you're submitting. For community projects, they're accepting requests within 5 different accounts, and that's Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and defense-wide agencies. The request for that is due in the next few weeks, and we do have our deadline on the 2nd. So if you submit that to us, we'll start kind of the vetting process and start placing those requests on your behalf. And so for the community project component of this is very similar to the guidelines that my colleague Ben went over. Nonprofits, has to provide a specific, and I saw in some of the questions, one question was asked about whether, you have to have the nonprofit status or not. You do. The most important part of where this goes to for community projects is the recipient of the funding has to be nonprofits, regardless of who's placing the request or how that's going. The entity that's receiving the request has to be nonprofit. Happy to answer more questions on that as needed. And for all different 3 subcommittees listed under myself, you can submit both a programmatic request and a community project request. The difference is obviously with the community project request, you're naming specifically the entity that you want this funding to be given to. Whereas the regular programmatic request is more wide. Names schools and universities need to receive this funding versus the community funding project will name the university, the specific entity that's receiving that. For the military constructions, veteran affairs, and the related agency subcommittee, same thing. They're also accepting the 3 different types of requests. They are not matching, they're not waiving the matching requirements. So under certain accounts, you do have to provide a matching source. So just be cognizant of that. And from our end, we do have to, before we can submit these requests that do require a matching source, we need to have that source given to us before we can submit the request on your behalf. So just, and make sure you do provide that for us. And then lastly, for the state and foreign operations and related agency subcommittee, they're not accepting community project funding requests. So just be mindful of that. They are, of course, accepting programmatic and language requests. So feel free to submit those our way as well. And the deadlines for those are all coming in the next 3 weeks. So the sooner you send that to us, the sooner we can start working with you on your specific requests. And that's all that I have, and happy to answer any questions and continue to add your questions in the chat for us to go over after the webinar.
Thank you, Zara. Thank you. Appreciate that. I will turn it over now to Denise Fernandez, who also started in our office about a week and a half ago as well. She comes from San Diego border region, San Diego, Tijuana, from the office of Congresswoman Susan Davis, but now is at the capital of the border, El Paso, Texas. Denise, I'll send it over to you.
Thank you very much, Eduardo, and good morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So as Eduardo said, my name is Denise Fernandez, and I will be handling the Homeland Security Subcommittee and the E-Commerce, Justice, and Science and other related agencies subcommittees for appropriations this year. And so for Homeland Security, they are accepting applications under 3 different accounts. Those are going to be the pre-disaster mitigation projects, the nonprofit security grant program projects, and the Emergency Operations Center grant program. So these do have cost sharing requirements, and those do vary from account to account, but generally it's about 75 to 15%. So just something to, so 75 federal government and 25% the cost sharing by the recipients of the grant. So the pre-mitigation disaster projects, they all have their notice of funding opportunities. They're all different. And on page 14 of the materials that you received, you should be able to click on those specific links, and it'll send you to that specific project's funding requirement, notice of funding opportunity. Specifically in the pre-disaster mitigation projects is where the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, the BRIC, grant program is considered for funding, and so that's for environmental and historic preservation requirements or anything like that. And all of these 3 categories that they're taking that they will be taking applications for must have proposals, must have a letter of support from the appropriate state administrative agency that they basically confirm that the project is viable. And anybody who does receive the grants is required to then submit their application to FEMA as well. So, you know, something to keep in mind in terms of those applications and that funding. Moving on to commerce, justice, and science related agencies. So first, the Department of Justice, they'll be doing 2 accounts this year. That's going to be the Burn JAG grants, and those are to assist state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies to prevent crime or improve their current existing criminal justice system and victim services. But they will not, historically, they do not provide funds for vehicle acquisition, building, renovation, or construction. So it's very likely that any request for that will not be selected. The other account they will be accepting applications for is it's called the Community Oriented Policing Services, shortened to COPS, and that is for the acquisition of technology and equipment for state, local, and tribal law enforcement to acquire the technology necessary to better their services and provide better law enforcement. And they also historically do not approve funds for vehicle acquisition or building construction, anything like that. And then there's, on the commerce side, there's NASA. And they will only be accepting any applications for grants that have anything to do with continuing NASA's mission, essentially STEM education, research and development, and also will not be accepting any application requests for building construction or renovation. And I think that is me.
Thank you, Denise. Ben Harrison, you all have met him. He has been with us since the beginning of 2019, but is a native of California. We won't hold that against him. I think we have a lot of Californians in our office, unfortunately, but we won't hold it against them. Ben Harrison.
Thanks, Eduardo. So yeah, as you can see under my portfolio, I have a good number of subcommittees in my area. So I'm just going to hit one of the accounts in each subcommittee. But again, I would encourage you to look through that resource guide we sent out to everybody because it has more details about each account available within the subcommittees. So to start off with agriculture, one of the accounts that is open within that is the community facilities grant account, and this can be used for healthcare, can be used for to purchase, construct, or improve essential community facilities, purchase equipment, and other items. The next subcommittee would be the Energy and Water Development Subcommittee. This account is a little unique in that the deadline for this is actually tied to when the president's budget comes out. So if you're interested in the accounts within the subcommittee, which is going to be U.S. Army Corps or the Bureau of Reclamation, we'll most likely have to follow up once the budget is out to figure out the right project request for you. The next subcommittee is the Financial Services Subcommittee. The only account open within this one is the Small Business Initiatives account within the SBA. And this account is going to be used to fund initiatives related to small business development and entrepreneurship. So a little broad, but I believe we go into more detail on our subcommittee form. The next account the next subcommittee I'm handling is Interior. One of the big account within this one that most folks are probably going to be interested in is the State and Tribal Assistance Grants account. This account is used for mainly funding local wastewater and drinking water infrastructure projects. So a great tool for El Paso to use to improve our water infrastructure if that's a project that one of you may submit. The next subcommittee that I cover is the Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education Subcommittee. This is a big subcommittee, and these are big accounts. So I'll cover the Health and Human Services subcommittee, just because I think there's a lot of interest in that in the community. So the account open within that is the Health Resources and Services Administration account. And this account is pretty flexible. Well, that's not flexible, but there's a lot of uses that could be brought out of this account, and project requests can be submitted for, including equipment, renovation, construction, and requests like that. Then the last account that I'm in charge of is the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development subcommittee account. So I would like to say right before I get into the accounts that are open within the subcommittee, there is going to be a surface reauthorization bill later this year for that's going to be happening, and the process for that is actually already occurring. So that is a separate process from this, and if you're interested in that process, you please feel free to email our infrastructure email, which is tx16.infrastructure@mail.house.gov. Again, that's tx16.infrastructure@mail.house.gov. But the accounts that are open within this one are certain highway and transit capital projects under Title 23 and Title 49. And then there's also the other account that is maybe of interest to the airport if they're on the call, the Airport Improvement Program, and that can be used for enhancing airport safety, capacity, and security, and mitigating environmental concerns. So these are all, again, I have a lot in my portfolio, and these are very broad subcommittees. So I really encourage you, if you have further questions, to again ask it on the chat here. If we're not able to get to them, feel free to email us at our appropriations email, tx16.approps@mail.house.gov.
Thank you, Ben. And Ben, can you? We had a couple questions on the labor HHS. Could you just repeat what accounts are open within those again?
Yeah. So let me. I'll go up to the accounts here. So I only cover the ones that are open within HHS, but since there are more questions about that committee in particular, I'll talk about all those accounts. So within that subcommittee, there's the Department of Labor, Employment, and Training Administration account. This is under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act Demonstration Program. These programs are mainly equipment purchases, and it does look like they do have to meet certain requirements. So that's the Department of Labor account. The Health Resources and Services Administration account, I went over that. That's used for mainly health equipment or health related items. The other HHS account that's open is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration account, and this is going to be used for grants related to mental health, so promoting the prevention and promoting treatment of mental health, including rehabilitation, outreach, and other support services, substance abuse treatment, substance abuse prevention. So that would be the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration account. And then the final account, the final two accounts that are open within the subcommittee are the Department of Education, Elementary and Secondary Education account, which can be used to fund different projects like instructional services, after-school centers, curricula development, teacher training, and the list goes on there. And then I should note that for the Elementary and Secondary Education account, these grants or the funding for this account can't be used for construction or renovation of school buildings. So I'll repeat that: it cannot be used for construction or renovation of school buildings. Only the items that are listed in our resource guide can be used. And then one other account is post-secondary education. So for the universities in the region and community colleges in the region as well.
Thank you for that, Ben. A very broad overview for our legislative team. We have a number of questions from folks. I am not going to, I'll just read them off for folks instead of calling a lot of anonymous questions, so we want to respect that as well. One question is, what are the primary differences between federal grants and community funded projects? Federal grants, you should be able to apply for every year. That is a grant program that has been funded through the appropriations process. You have to compete. Like I said, you can get a lot of support from our Congresswoman's office. Community funded projects are very new this year. We gave you this overview earlier. We don't know if it's going to be a continuing process every year, every fiscal year. So, you know, we don't know what FY23 will look like, but that is a direct spending mechanism that we can fight for and get direct project funded in our community. Whereas a federal grant, you would have to go through the grant writing process, write your proposal, work with our office if you'd like, and submit it through the respective agency and apply that way as well. So thank you so much for that question. Next question, if our projects are both in Texas 16 and Texas 23, can we still submit? Yes, absolutely. You should feel free to submit. We are one region. We will look at every request and follow up with you, look at their viability, and work with you and work with the joining members as well to make sure that they get through the process. Like I said, there's another question, is the community project funding. Will this be a following year situation or just a one-time deal? That is still to be determined. We don't know what FY23 will look like. Our hope is that this is a way for members of Congress who know their districts the best, the Congresswoman who knows El Paso and our border region the best in Congress, can fight to get funding for direct projects back home for fellow El Pasoans. There's a great question on letters of support and letters of from local governments, if given the time frame. And I think if for some reason you cannot complete a full package by April 2nd, please note that in your submission and email us at this email, tx16.approps@mail.house.gov. We'll work with you to make sure that you guys can get the full package that you need post April 2nd. So, you know, if that is an issue that you are having in terms of putting together a full packet, email us there, and somebody from our team, whoever account that you're trying to submit to or subcommittee, that staffer will reach out to you to work on that. Is there a max on the dollar amount that can be requested? Like we said earlier, we don't have a definitive answer on that. We can only go off of what the Appropriations Committee has given us, which is look back at the historical record of direct funding requests from before 2010. Those have really varied. You know, the median is between 250,000 to a little upward of north of $1 million. Really don't have a definitive answer on that, but that's our suggestion. That's our recommendation, given the guidance they have given us. If we get a definitive answer for every subcommittee, we will most certainly forward that out to folks. So I hope that answered your question. Is arts and culture a category for community funded projects? Ben, I want to defer to you on that. Do you know that answer?
So I don't believe arts and culture is an account that is open, or if there's an account for that. If there was an account, it would most likely be under the Labor, Health and Human Services subcommittee, but I have not seen any guidance on that in particular. So I believe the answer is no, unfortunately.
Okay, and we'll, you know, I know who asked that question. We'll follow up with y'all on that once we get a little bit more guidance. There's another great question. How long can a project be? When must the project be completed? I believe it is in the fiscal year of 2022. Ben or Zada or Denise, maybe you could jump on that.
I think so, and we can get more. We can try to follow up with more clear guidance. But the project needs to use all the fiscal year 2022 funding within the fiscal year, is my understanding. Not that the project necessarily needs to be finished, but happy to get more guidance and follow up on that question in particular.
Thank you for that. We will also, there's a couple questions on getting the resource guide that we sent around. We will send it around to everyone that has RSVP'd. I did that, I believe, yesterday. But if you did not get it, feel free to email us at tx16.approps@mail.house.gov, and we will get that to you. There's a question on could we submit multiple projects for various accounts? Yes, you can, as long as you we will. And the amount requested, $1 million, 250,000, 500K, whatever, that is not an aggregate. It's per project. That is what we're going to be basing it on. So it is not an aggregate of your entire requests for multiple projects. It's a per project funding level. We will provide, when we put up the resource guide probably has a lot more information, or it does have a lot more information than our presentation. So for those that are asking for the presentation, I would refer you to our resource guide, as that will have a lot more information than that. And like as Ben said earlier, if you have interest in the surface reauthorization bill that we sent out guidance for, please email us at tx16.infrastructure@mail.house.gov, and I will send that email around. Let me see what other questions. Generally, what type of projects is the Congresswoman looking for? That is a great question, and at the beginning of this, we want to ensure that any projects that are funded will, the Congresswoman wants to ensure that any projects that are funded will help move El Paso economically and move it forward to continue our economic growth in El Paso. But we are happy to look at every project individually and ensure that it meets some of those requirements. Our resource guide, we have a great overview of what we're looking for, what the Congressman is looking for on specific projects. There's another question on the type of projects that can be funded through the SBA. Ben, I know you touched on that a bit, but can you touch on the SBA a little bit more again?
Yeah. So again, our subcommittee forms have more information on the account than we have here. But from my understanding, that account is a little broad in terms of what that money, that funding can be used for. And I think we're still kind of getting clarification as to the types of projects that can be accepted. So if you want to follow up with us at the Texas 16.approps email and give us a broad view of what you have in mind for your project, I could see if we can if it's something that is acceptable through the committee.
Thank you. And there's a great question on before we submit, can we run a few project ideas by you on the staff level? Absolutely. Email us at tx16.approps, and whatever account you're trying to submit a project for, that staffer will reach out to you and answer kind of guide you through that process. Thank you for that question. Can you please discuss a bit more on the matching requirements? Is it a percentage of the total cost of the project? I believe, Ben, it differs between subcommittees.
Yeah, it differs between subcommittees, the matching requirements. So if you are going to be applying for a request for a account that does have a matching requirement and have more questions on it, again, email us at TX16, and the appropriate staffer who's covering that account can get you the information that you're looking for.
Thank you, Ben. Let me go through these questions here. We've discussed the maximum amount of requests. As you said, we don't. We're still trying to get clarity on that, but we are going with the historical perspective on this, and the ranges that have previously been there have been what I've discussed: 250 to a little north of $1 million. So if you have any specific question on that, please reach out to us. For transportation projects, do projects need to be included within STIP? And Ben, I think that's a great question for the surface reauth stuff, but I don't know if it applies to approps as well.
Yeah, so it applies to approps, and the guidance that we've gotten is that it's the project needs to be supported by the local and state government that's going to be administering that project. And they've said that inclusion in the STIP or the TIP would satisfy this requirement, but it doesn't say that it's required. So I'll gladly circle back on that and make sure that we have some more clarity on that. And then I know in our separate process for the surface reauthorization, it's a different process, and I don't believe they don't need to be on the STIP or a TIP, but they need to be on another section. So feel free to, for infrastructure project questions, again, email me at tx16.infrastructure@mail.house.gov, and I'm happy to answer questions there.
Thank you. And I know we have a number of infrastructure questions, so please just, if you could email Ben at tx16.infrastructure@mail.house.gov. For those that are interested in that infrastructure package that will likely move over the summer, we will likely be doing something similar just for infrastructure and transportation as guidance comes out for that process in the next week and a half. So to stay up to date with that, if you want to RSVP for something or want us to circulate that info, please email us at tx16.infrastructure@mail.house.gov. I think we have time for one or two more questions. How many projects may be submitted by each entity, either total or per subcommittee? Ben, my understanding, and Zado or Denise, my understanding is I don't know if there is a limit. I know there's going to be some mechanisms to how many we can actually submit to the committees, but in terms of communities submitting projects, I don't believe there's a limit, correct?
In terms of submitting to our office, no, there's no. If you have more than one project that you'd like to submit to us for our evaluation, no, there's no limit on how many you can submit to us, and we'll of course we'll evaluate them and work with you all if we do intend to move forward with that project.
Yeah. There are limits on how many we can submit to the various subcommittees. I know in the past it's been 75 per subcommittee, and that might look different with community projects this year, but there is a limit on what we can actually submit.
I will say, and that's a great segue also, Zada and Ben, look at the programmatic funding that would fund a grant or a grant that you would want to apply for, because that is where UASI, urban area security initiatives, or various other research grants, et cetera. If we could get those programmatic funding, the top dollar funding for those, it's better chance for you next fiscal year to apply for a grant once those guidances come out. Work with our office to secure those grants. If community project funding does not if during the appropriation process it doesn't make it all the way through. I think that is the time that we have. And we have everyone's questions that weren't able to get answered today. We will follow up with you all individually. Also, just please email us at tx16.approps@mail.house.gov. Our team has access to that account. It's everyone's account, and we'll be able to work with you all in answering those questions. Or feel free to reach out to us directly. Myself, most of you all probably have my email already, eduardo.ledema@mail.house.gov, and I can work to get you that answer to your specific questions. Very much appreciate you all being with us for the hour. I hope this helped with some clarity, and happy to continue talking with you and connecting with you all with any questions you might have from our inbox, and we'll connect with you over the phone. Talk to you all soon and appreciate it. Thank you.